So I wanted to talk a little bit about some issues in code, and there are several things that I want you to do when you are writing your code. The first thing is to make sure that you include remark statements at the very top of the code and within each event, and also to erase any dead code that you have. So first, for the dead code, let's say for example if you're in Design View and you're clicking around and you double click on one of the objects, and it could be the form, it could be maybe you accidentally double click on the picture box, and you get these empty events. Well, if you don't need those, if you go in at the end of your coding and you finished everything and it runs properly and these are empty, that's called dead code. It's extra code that you do not need, and that needs to be deleted. So if you just go in and highlight those lines from the private sub to the end sub and delete those, that makes the code much easier to read, so that if someone else comes back in, they won't wonder why those empty procedures or events are there. So delete any dead code that you have, because I will deduct some points for that in the future. The next is the remarks statements, and for the remark statements you can see in this one there are remark statements in each procedure. Okay, so you should have, and sometimes if it's a longer procedure with multiple tasks, you may want to go ahead and have multiple remark statements. And in Visual Basic, they start with an apostrophe, and it will be in green. Okay, so that's the format I expect you to use in Visual Basic. I know some formats will work that you use in other languages, but in Visual Basic, I want you to use the standards that are in the book. So you would use an apostrophe there. So make sure that you have those in each procedure, and at the top of the code you should go in and include your name, and any other options that I ask you to document. The remark statements are, and they call them comments as well. They're mainly for documentation. They're not executed by Visual Basic. It skips over these lines. So it's mainly just documentation for you or someone else who is using the program to see what has been done in the program. So depending on what I've asked you to include in your remark statements, some things you might include if you were working in a company is the name of the program, what the date was that the program was written, and the purpose of the program. So make sure that you include your remark statements and delete any dead code. And one other thing I do want to note is that your public class should be here, the first line of your actual code, and your end class should always be at the very end. Sometimes it's easy to delete that end class if you've deleted some code, and you can see this is going to give you an error message. It says it must end with the matching end class. So just go back in at the very end and just type end class. And make sure that, if you do get an error like that, you can just easily correct it by making sure that you have public class at the top and end class at the bottom.